Welcome everybody to Congregation Va-Dor's Touch of Torah. And tonight we have again Andy Susman with a touch of music. We're thrilled to have Andy. He's stepping in for Rabbi Barry, who had another engagement this evening and at the last minute could not be attending tonight. So thank you for being here on August 9th as we learn the Torah of Deuteronomy V'ETCHANON. And I take it over to you, Andy, for the rest.
Well, I thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is a very important portion, and we'll get to that in a moment. Let me first welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Touch of Torah, and when I'm here, they add the extra appendage or addendum and music. So let me screen share, and let's see if we can do this. So there's that. Do you see some Hebrew words?
Yes.
Good. This is that same page from a couple weeks back. And so let me do our medley, and we will talk in a moment. So these are many of these songs. If you are traditional, you grew up with these songs in Cheder. And I remember very early on, Torah, 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 Torah. Oh, time out. Let me expand that. Boom. Here we go. Torah, 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 Torah. Tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe. The Torah which Moses commanded us is the heritage of Jacob, the congregation of Jacob. And once again, that's from this book, Deuteronomy, toward the end, chapter 33. And Yisrael, Yisrael, Ve'yoraita Charu, Torah, Ora, Torah, Ora, Hallelujah. Torah, Ora, Torah, Ora, Hallelujah.
We have one more song that Andy needs to lead us in. Today is Andy's birthday, August 9th. So happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andy. Happy birthday to you.
And of course, we're going to sing. Thank you, Sharon. Got to sing in Hebrew. Yom Huledet Sameach, Yom Huledet Sameach, Yom Huledet Sameach.
Yom Huledet Sameach, Andy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And of course, it's important we did it now because, at the end, things get out of our hand. We might have forgotten. So we checked that box. I appreciate that. And it's a joyous occasion to study and talk Torah on one's birthday. So, having said that, one of the classic texts for celebrating Torah is Eitz Chaim, and here is the traditional melody we're all familiar with. Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba betomcheha מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה shalom. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Shalom, 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 shalom. Another beautiful song that is explicitly for studying Torah, and a blessing and a song. It's La'asok b'divrei Torah, which translates to immerse oneself in the study of Torah. Let's see. Baruch, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'mitzvotav v'tzivanu La'asok b'divrei Torah La'asok b'divrei Torah Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Let us soak it up, let it all sink in. Sweet words of Torah, let us soak it up, let it all sink in. Sweet words of Torah, sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. And one more classic song, which I do not have a share the lyrics for you, but we all know this in our DNA, and it goes like this: Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim. On three things the world stands. Al shlosha devarim haolam omed al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. On Torah and on prayer, on deeds of loving kindness. So we can make that go away. So I want to briefly reprise last week's portion as a segue to this week's portion. Oh, got to fix that side there, which we will do like so. There we go. See that? I'm trainable. So last week's portion, we began the last book of the five. And the last book was added later because the rabbis realized that there needed to be repetition. And the way the story unfolds in the Torah, we can see that. There's so much backsliding time and time again, trying to get through the wilderness, trying to rally the troops to enter the promised land. It was a constant struggle. 40 years to get from point A to point B, and it should have taken maybe a few weeks, a few months, a handful of years, but not 40. And so here we are. So real quickly to reprise that, you can see that in the text there. The Deuteronomy means repetition of the law. So once again, it says the entire book, save the very end where Moses passes, is a recounting by Moses of the three previous books. We're leaving Bereshit, Genesis off the table. It's Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Though that's the core of who we are today. Genesis was sort of like the prequel, but the real essence of us here now and who we are as Jews in terms of the evolution of our people is really Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, the journey since leaving Egypt. So one of the things I wanted to mention briefly about Devarim as a totality, or last week's parasha in particular, the word Devarim means words or things. And I brief reprise here. Moses, back in Exodus, when he had ran away from Egypt and wanted out, forget about the royalty and all that. He figured, I'm done. I'm not cool with all that. Ran off into the wilderness, and he encountered the burning bush. And God kind of approached him and with a mission. And Moses said, but let's see, have somebody read. Eileen Edelman, would you read, "Oh my Lord"? And Moses said to the Lord. I don't hear you, not yet. Nope, don't hear you, still don't hear you.
Eileen, unmute yourself. Not sure.
Well, maybe you can get someone
No.
else to do it.
Yeah.
Call someone
How
else.
about
Pick on someone.
Valerie? Valerie, can you do it?
I got it now.
Oh, you do. Okay, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I just got a new computer today, so I'm just kind of,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Go
please
ahead,
forgive me.
Eileen.
Now I got it. And Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither yesterday nor today, before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue."
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay. And the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes the dumb or deaf, or the seeing or the blind? It is not I, the Lord. If it is not I, the Lord. Now, therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say."
Okay, so it goes on, and so here we are. That was back in Exodus. That was the very beginning of what's coming. So here we are, 40 years, almost 40 years later, and Moses is nearing the end of his life, and he suddenly, over time, he found his voice. It wasn't a sudden thing; it was an evolutionary thing. And here in the the last book, he's able to deliver a 33 chapter summation of his life's mission. So I'm going to put this question out to you just briefly, because I don't know what you chatted about last week. But over the next 40 years, Moses learned how to allow God to speak through him. Now, if I remember, in the last book, Bamidbar, in the wilderness, doesn't really mean in the wilderness. It means in the place of speaking, in the place where we can hear God speaking. So the punchline there is, most of our journey, or early part of our journey, needs to be about listening and receiving and learning and taking in, being a student. So the wilderness served that as a crucible, a experimental phase, if you will. So here we are in the last book, and Moses has clearly found his voice. He has a lot to say. So in the opening verse of Devarim, it says Moses. No, the fifth of the beginning verses. Moses undertook to explain this Torah, or it says Moses undertook to well up this Torah, or on the far side of the Jordan, the land of Moab, this Torah welled up in Moses. So I don't have it here, but I'm going to tell you the story. So there's a particular word, and there's two different spellings. One spelling is with a Vav, and one spelling is with a Aleph. And the different spellings, one word means a cistern, which is a closed container, and the other spelling means a well. And a well has an entry point from outside. You can take water, and then the water replenishes from another source. So the idea is that as living human beings, truthfully, we are not cisterns, we are wells. And if we allow life's experiences to accumulate and pass through us, and we journey through life, our well will always be refilled, and we will have the resources to communicate and understand God's word, and then share that with others. So Moses was an example of how to be a well and allow the wisdom of the ages to channel through him. So I basically asked some questions here. Let's see, a little earlier. In what ways is Moses an archetype of our own journey toward finding our voice? Now, everyone here tonight is of a certain age. There's nobody south of 50, and I'm being kind with that number. But even so, even now, even at our late stages in life, we still have the opportunity to find our voice. There's a lifetime of experiences and wisdom to share. So if we didn't think we had it figured out before, if we're patient with ourselves, we're going to find all that wisdom. So real quickly, JK stands for Jonathan Kligler. By the time, and let's have another reader. Joel, please read by the time.
By the time Moses speaks Sefer Devarim, the books of words, he has mastered the subtle skill of allowing words to well up in him. He becomes the well. The teachings flow from his lips. Indeed, as his oration reaches its climax at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses does his utmost to imbue the children of Israel with the understanding that they too are wells and not cisterns, and will be able to continue to connect with the divine after Moses is gone.
Okay, so there's some text here at the end of Deuteronomy, and there's a song that I wanted to grab, and I kind of was rushing, didn't get it. And the opening phrase is Lo Bashamayim He, and it talks about that. I'll read it. This teaching. The word Torah literally means teaching, and so this teaching, which I command you this day, is not hidden from you. It's not far off. It's not up in heaven. It's not beyond the sea. At the very end, it is near you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart. You may do it. So the idea of complaining that all of this is too hard to do is narishkeit. We can learn over time and be transformed. And here we are. We're studying Torah, and we're going to learn. So that's my little synopsis of Devarim, words. And speaking of words, the very next portion, V'ETCHANON, is perhaps one of the most iconic parashot of all of them. And we're going to make this primer because it's not complicated. This is stuff we know. So let's see here. V'ETCHANON tells the story of Moses' plea to enter the promised land. It opens with that. And it goes on to recount the Ten Commandments and then gives the Shema, our central prayer affirming the unity of God. Okay, so all the core things that we know as Jews are in this portion. This is, if you had, out of the 54 portions, this would be absolutely in the top 10, probably the top 5, maybe even number 1. But we can have that chat some other time. So I want to spend a lot of time further on, but before I do that, I want to start. Let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. So the opening of V'ETCHANON is Moses pleading with God. Now, once again, that's what V'ETCHANON means. It says, I implored, I pleaded. Okay, I need a reader. So Sharon, please pick someone who hasn't read yet.
Alan, would you like to read?
Sure. And I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you have begun to show your servants your greatness and your mighty hand. What God is there in heaven or in earth that can do according to your works and according to your might? I beg you, let me go over and see the good land that is beyond the Jordan, that goodly mountain region and Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me for your sakes and would not hear me. And the Lord said to me, let it suffice. You have so much, more than enough. Speak no more to me of this matter.
Okay, so I had this new technique I developed this week that I can reference different rabbis, just a couple of initials. So SG stands for Shefa Gold, and she's a Jewish renewal rabbi. Great, great book. I've mentioned this book numerous times to you guys, and I'll hold it up again if you can see it. It's called Torah Journeys. I don't know if it works or not. There you go. Torah Journey. Anyway, we'll maybe what I'll do is I'll make a bibliography or whatever. I'll send it to Sharon. She'll forward it to you guys. Definitely something to have in your library. So the key phrase of all that text is Rav Lach. You have greatness. You have enough. And so what is going on here? Well, once again, all of us here are so graced for longevity. I'm probably one of the junior members of this esteemed gathering, and yet I am aware that I have been blessed with a number of years. Oh, you just sang for me my birthday song, but there's another song that would go with that. when I get older, losing my many years from now. Oh, too late. It's today. It happens already. When I'm
64.
So
Boom,
today I'm
boom.
64. And that's a big number unless you're 74 or 84. So anyway, I've reached a rather auspicious number. But having said that, God forbid I should get some certain news tomorrow morning or next week or next month. I want to embrace this reality that I'm grateful for what I've been given. So here we are, close to the end of the Torah, and Moses has been told, dude, you ain't getting in. But wait, no, I paid my dues. I've worked so hard on your behalf. And hey, I'm sorry. That's the story. You're not getting in. Oh, come on. Well, eventually Moses relents, and he relents. God's not budging. And so he finishes his job. He passes the baton to Joshua and so forth. But before he does that, the lion's share of Deuteronomy are these 33 chapters that Moses is going through 3 discourses, reprising all the lessons that they need to remember. And we're going to have fun with that in the coming weeks, but right now it's focused on this one. This is really core. So I'm going to scroll ahead. Now, once again, Moses can't go into the promised land, but let's have another reader, Sharon, right there.
Gloria, you want to help us out?
And
Can you read it?
yes, get up to the top of Pisgah and lift up your eyes westward and northward and southward and eastward, and behold it with your eyes, for you shall not go over this Jordan. But charge Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which you shall see. So we remained in the valley opposite Beth Peor.
Okay, so once again, this Moses was told, you can look, but you can't touch. Anyway, that's it. But then there's a lot more after this. We're at the beginning of Deuteronomy, so there's a lot more to come. So I'm going to skip ahead because we're going to focus on the core stuff that we're all familiar with. So in chapter 6, we're all familiar with the Shema. Okay. So I need another reader. Who wants to be that reader?
I'll read. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates.
Okay, so I'm going to sing for you that text, slight variation, but not too much, Debbie Friedman's melody. Now, it's not in front of you. You can keep your eyes open or close your eyes, and I have some more to share with you after that. So hang on, here we go. So I want you to listen, and I will say in deference or to honor Debbie Friedman of blessed memory, this was one of her opening numbers at the beginning of her career. And it is still one of the most iconic melodies and presentations of her rather expansive, record of music. And so here we go. Just, you can close your eyes or open them either way. Here we go. And you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And all these words which I command you on this day shall be upon your heart, shall be upon your heart. You shall teach them diligently unto your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and when you rise. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hat, and they shall be the frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house, and upon your gates, and upon your gates, that you may remember and do all of my commandments, and be holy unto your God, unto your God, unto your God. Sorry about that. Okay, so before we continue with the V'Ahavtah, I want to actually go back to the Shema, because I want to take a moment or two, or four, to embrace the discussion of what is it we imagine God to be. Before we do that, let's deal with the text of the Shema. So I'm going to go to another screen, which actually, the Shema is not there. So anyway, I want you to close your eyes and take your right hand and cover your eyes, and we're going to chant the traditional melody. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Here's another melody that we're familiar with for that. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Now I've got one more that's not in front of you, but we've done it once or twice in the past. This other melody is by a reasonably more modern singer-songwriter named Billy Jonas, not from the Jonas Brothers, Billy Jonas, and goes like this. This is the prayer of our fathers and mothers. This is the prayer of our sisters and brothers. This is the prayer supporting all others. We say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Everything is God. Everything is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Everything is God. Everything is one. So I will say that there are many melodies for the Shema, but the reason why I included that one is precisely because of the English and the unique character of the words that really elevate the whole text. It's not just a nice melody. And so the question is, what is it maybe I should stop screen share for a minute, and let's talk for a moment about how we understand and imagine God. So, who wants to offer some framings of what that means? I know a while back, I think Stanley we had a conversation, and Stanley, I was suggesting other words for God, like eternal, Adonai, source. Rabbi Jonathan Kligler, his favorite phrase is life unfolding. I mean, there's many, dozens and dozens. So does anybody else want to weigh in on this? How would you, yeah, go for it, Valerie.
Well, I was going back to Debbie Friedman's song a minute ago on line number 8. It always struck me when she says, "You will put a sign upon your hand and use as frontlets between your eyes." That always reminded me of when my father used to wrap Tefillin. Wrapped it around his hand, wrapped it around his arms, then wrapped it around his head, and there was the box right in the middle of his forehead when he put talits on. And
Right.
that line always reminded me of that image I have of my father doing that.
Well, I'm getting goosebumps listening to you share that, because that's kind of what I feel as well from your reportage there. And what I want you to understand as far as music for me, it's really about the end receiver. It's not about my performance or presentation. It's about how it moves you. And so the lucidity of this particular composition is that Debbie really doesn't add anything. She gives the text as is. Now, if you're familiar with the original, Debbie uses Old English, thou and shout and all that. That was the vernacular, 50, 60 years ago. Well, 40 years ago, when I started, playing guitar or whatever, I immediately says, we ain't doing that. I made it into regular, more contemporary English. But it is essentially a linear translation. She did not add anything. And that's the brilliance of it. The text speaks for itself. What she did was add the melody, which gives it a life of its own and allows us to embrace it with a little lilt on our ear. So anyway, so that's really nice, that particular deal. Now, but getting back to the verbiage of God. So in my readings today, one of the things that's coming, and we'll get to that in a little bit, is this idea of chosen people. And we're going to come back to that. But before I do, I'm going to screen share again.
Wait
But
a
I
minute.
have, yeah.
Wait a minute, Andy, because Stan has something to say and I do too. Go ahead, Stan.
Well, Andy, if you remember, I was objecting, not so much objecting, we were talking about the priestly benediction back then. And the version that we're using eliminated the G word.
Gotcha. No argument. Gotcha. Okay, you were absolutely right. So I'm not advocating eliminating a word for quote unquote G. I'm just suggesting various other
It's okay by me,
possibilities.
but the
Yeah.
way it's
No,
worded now, it's
understood.
impersonal. Yeah.
Okay, we'll reprise that. But I have something very interesting to share with you guys. I guess we go back to that. So let me, okay, we're here. Let me go to this slide. And so there is the Hebrew of the V'Ahavtah, and we could chant it. I'll chant the first line just to kind of tickle your memory. V'Ahavtah et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha. And if we process through the rest of it, we get to the bottom. Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Now, there are many translations of this text, different verbiage, slight word here, word there. At the very top, you have a Jewish renewal translation of the opening sequence. And love Adonai your God, however you imagine God to be, with an open heart, a healthy body, and a clear mind. And we could process through a number of others. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you a rather unique interpretation of the V'Ahavtah. And this one is probably one you've never heard of. It's from a Jewish renewal rabbi. I came across this probably 30 years ago. Haven't sung it much because I don't really have an audience that I can share it with. But because tonight's Torah portion is explicitly V'Ahavtah from Deuteronomy, I wanted to give it a shot. So we've already heard and read the traditional text of the linear translation. And so the refrain is V'Ahavtah et Adonai. So I'm going to sing for you the refrain because I'm going to have to scroll up and we'll lose it. So here we go. So here's the chorus to this next piece of the puzzle. V'Ahavtah et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. One more time. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. And you shall teach your children as you live each day, the path you walk, the way you talk, how you listen for the good in each soul, saying, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. Plant seeds of loving kindness in the fertile soil of faith. The joy we sow, the path will help us grow. A fragrant garden of truth embracing. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. We inscribe these words on the doorpost of our being. With heart and mind, we each can find the precious light that we are seeking. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. And that is by Hannah Teferet Siegel. And so I thought you'd appreciate that.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, it was. And I heard it for the first time maybe 30 years ago. And it's been part of my psyche ever since. But like I said, I haven't had much opportunity to share it because generally I've been involved with more traditional congregations. But I've hung on to it anyway, nevertheless.
So Andy, you said that was Jewish Renewal.
Correct.
So last week when we had Robert Jaffe with us, he mentioned that many of the songs of Jewish Renewal are basically Hasidic, and they've just been modernized from Hasidic songs. Is that so? Is this one?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Jewish Renewal is much more multifaceted than that. One aspect of Jewish Renewal is neo-Hasidisha, but that's only one component. It's a little more diverse than that, which is kind of what I like. That song like As We Bless. Now that one actually is Reconstructionist, but there's another one, just for the fun of it while we're on the topic, that you've heard me sing, the Baruch Hu. And that's like that Native American chant goes, and there's like an echo. Baruch Hu, dear one, Shekhinah, holy name. When I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Baruch Hu, and so forth. So for me, Jewish Renewal is the spectrum of mystical paths, and you bring them in and put a little, maybe a Jewish spin on it. But it's not just Hasidic or Orthodoxy. It's a larger tent than that. So yeah, and that's really what makes Jewish Renewal so unique. It is not as much a theological perspective, which Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstruction are. you could be Jewish renewal and any one or all of the others. So Jewish renewal is really about being authentic wherever you find yourself. And it doesn't promulgate a particular theological perspective. It says embrace, hug, dance with your Judaism, dance with your God, or God, however you imagine God to be. So, having said that, any more comments? I'll go back to the text, and there is another component I wanted to share with you.
Well, last week, the conversation sort of hinted, not hinted, but actually he said, if I remember correctly, Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, that in his service, it was at Bob's service, there was mostly singing, very little actual prayer saying, that most of his service was done musically. And the prayers or the feeling or the service itself was very musical in nature.
Yep.
As opposed to just saying a prayer or reading a book.
Gotcha. Well, so let's sit with that for a minute. So we're all familiar with that projection. So to not have a book in your hand, but maybe have a screen up on the wall so that you can sort of not be encumbered with a thing in your hand. However, many of us old schoolers like a text, like a siddur. We like touching a siddur. We like looking at the Hebrew. But in addition, for those of another generation, the next generation, the younger generation, maybe a large screen TV displaying the text gives that another dimension for them. But one of the things that you've seen me try to do is I like to weave an eclectic presentation. I love tradition. I love modernity. So I don't want to necessarily lose anybody. I want to bring people along the way. So I want people to feel comfortable wherever they're at. Bring the old, embrace the new. So anything else?
You were asking for different names of what we felt God was. And I feel it is a creative power and
Absolutely.
within me and around me. And like that song that you do sometimes when we do Shabbat, where you say here, there, everywhere, and you use your hands. That's how I feel.
Okay, let's take a moment and do that. Everybody take your left hand and say God is here. Take your right hand, God is there. God is truly everywhere. Take both hands. Left, right, up, down, in, out, all around. Here, there, everywhere. That's where God may be found. And I'll just share with you, when I've worked many years at different temples, that's one of the hardcore number one things I try to present. Because if they never learn a word of Hebrew, to me, that's the most important concept of what is it, how do you embrace God? God is everywhere. And there's a great quote, Hasidic quote, rabbi. He talks to his student. He says, tells the boy, he says, I'll give you a penny if you can tell me where God is. And the boy, being clever and wise, he said, Rabbi, I'll give you 2 pennies if you can tell me where God isn't. And so that kind of goes with that little chant that I just shared with you. But I'll give you one more kind of a funny thing. So once, going back like 20 years ago, one of my principals thought that hand motion thing was very childish. And I was to myself, I'm thinking, well, that's not how I would frame it. I would call it mostly Tai Chi-ish. But I didn't go there. I just kind of let her have her say. But anyway, the kids always love it. Years later, when I see them out in the public, oh, Mr. Susman, I love that song. Anyway, so all right. So let me go screen share. But before I do that, anybody have something else to share? Nothing's triggered. Okay, not yet. Okay, cool. All right. So there is a discussion point that I want to share with you. It's not opening. Well, maybe I got to do that. There we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So we've talked about the V'Ahavtah. Once again, I'll reprise this. We are in Deuteronomy, the second parasha, this is the first time we are here, and the only time that you're going to see in text the Shema and the V'Ahavtah. Now, you will see that for the second time the Ten Commandments. But the Ten Commandments are not something we recite every day. We recite multiple times a day the Shema and the V'Ahavtah. And this has become, as part of our DNA, whether we're practicing Jews or even not, we're very familiar with this text. Okay, so scrolling ahead, so we're now in chapter 7, and I'm going to ask someone, Sharon, to pick someone else to read.
Paul, can you read for us?
Let me unmute you. Hold on.
I
Go
have
ahead,
to
you're
unmute.
unmuted, Paul.
Wait, let me oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a special people to himself above all peoples that are upon the face of the earth. Go on. The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people, for you are the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved you, and because you would keep the oath which you had sworn to your father, has the Lord brought you out with mighty hand and redeemed you out of the house of slaves from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore for the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, which keeps covenant and mercy, and those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repays those who hate him to their face to destroy them. He will not be slack to him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. You shall therefore keep the commandments and the statutes and the commandments which I command you to this day to do them.
Okay, I think Eileen, is there a TV on at your house?
I think that was Paul. That was
Paul?
Paul.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Paul. So real quickly, what you probably deduced from this reading is this is where it talks about the Jews as a chosen people. And this has been a little bit disarming in the modern world in terms of embracing that same concept. But I want to share with you that from Rabbi Kligler that every culture many times feels that they are special. Prior to the modern idea of a global perspective of all being under one God, to be in a special and central relationship with the cosmos and with their specific deity or deities was not unusual. So, for example, an example would be the Navajo. The Navajo call themselves the Dine, simply meaning the people or children of the holy people. This self-understanding did not necessarily lead to the conclusion that other peoples were subhuman, but it did mean that only the people themselves were the central actors in maintaining the cosmic order. So think about that. Think about even the Navajo felt that they had a central role in the cosmos more so than, say, other people, or it's a very central relationship with the spirit. And so the idea of chosenness, though not unique to Jews in the old world, how do we deal with that as we've been transitioning to the new? So let me help you with that a little bit. So let me stop screen share here. Okay, so in the 20th century, getting back to different religions, different denominations, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan developed Reconstructionist Judaism. And he did so explicitly to address this issue of chosenness. And let me share with you a thought or two on that. So, Kaplan said the idea of a deity singling out and choosing certain humans over others was patently absurd. He held that Judaism and all cultures and religions are human products, the striving of human beings to discern and articulate their sense of purpose and place in the universe. Thus, even the Torah is a record of our searching for God. Not a divine document, but an inspired human effort. Kaplan insisted that it was our duty to reconstruct our traditions and concepts to make them meaningful and relevant to our evolving understanding of the universe. And I explicitly wanted to share that with you because that's what Va-Dor Va-Dor is about. It's about honoring tradition, embracing science, and celebrating spirituality. How do we try, and this is Rabbi Barry's vision as well, how do we evolve from this insular perspective to a more expansive one? Now, the phrase "or legoyim" is in Isaiah, and I'm trying to think. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Back in Isaiah 42, which I had written it down somewhere in this document, but let me read it to you. I, Adonai, have called you in righteousness and taken you by the hand. I created you and gave you my covenant to be a light to the nations. Now, here's the deal. The way that we Jews have danced around this issue of chosenness is not so much that we're superior. Three things. One, that contract, that covenant was conditional. We had to be worthy of that status by acting honorably. Room for discussion. Two, there's nothing inherently superior about Jews. We were chosen for a unique mission. Once again, that phrase, or legoyim. And the third one, it's a universal mission to serve all of humanity by demonstrating through our behavior the truth of the moral law that underpins the cosmos. But like I said just moments ago, other cultures feel the same way. We are the chosen. We have the way. And so the question is, how do we move on from that idea of chosenness to maybe a choosing people? We have beautiful traditions and culture, but we don't want to put ourselves on a pedestal above others. And so I open it up for discussion.
If you go back to one of the passages of what you just had on the screen, I think it's number 10, if I'm not mistaken. It says really very explicitly that you will not, in your face, it's literally saying in your face, and repay those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack to him who hates him, will repay him to his face. Okay. And that seems to be a reoccurring theme. And that really kind of, to me, talks about Barry. He is constantly, his opinions, how he feels, his strong beliefs, he's in your face. He's not going to back down. He's not going to talk behind your back. He's not going to undermine you. He's going to be in your face. And he's going to tell you what he thinks.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm getting little goosebumps just listening to you. So I want you to think about this for a minute. There's 3 core paragraphs in the V'Ahavtah. This is just the first one. The second paragraph is actually more illuminating than even the first, and it comes from Numbers. It comes from the previous portion. But the thing is, the second paragraph, I think it's the second paragraph. The second paragraph talks about being in balance with nature. So the second paragraph would be explicitly out of Rabbi Barry's playbook. Because if you just take away the fact that it's in the Torah, ignore that for a minute. Here we are in the 21st century, and we knew this in the 20th century. We knew we were racing to the bottom of the line about how to live in harmony with the environment. And what do we do about it? Very little. And what are we doing now? Very little. It's a drop in the bucket. And we're just giving lip service. And so if you're trying to find relevancy in this text, it's right there. You don't have to think that you're Jewish or you're some other culture. It says, wait a minute, it's talking about global warming right there, or climate change or whatever. If we don't live in balance with the environment, we won't have the crops growing properly. There'll be drought and there'll be famine. It's right there in the second paragraph, which I didn't show you now. But getting back to what Valerie lucidly saw, she had it, she retained it in your face, in your face. So the question is, God is not the Jewish God. God is the like creative process, or this not impersonal creative force in the universe, which is what Barry talks about all the time. And there's a book I believe by Richard Dawkins. It's called Unweaving the Rainbow. And Rabbi Barry's premise is that the more we understand about science, the more we begin to have a sense of awe and reverence for the totality of all. So, anybody else? So if I was to come full circle back to the name of this portion, V'ETCHANON, and that opening section there, Rav Lach, you have plenty. What do you want? You want more? So the question is, if we live to 60 or we live to 70, what? You want to live to 90? You want to live to 91? You get what you get and you don't fret. Remember that from preschool? When you get the cookies were passed out, or the cup of juice, or you get this much juice or this much juice or whatever. The punchline is, one of the reasons we have all this tumult in the world, arrogance, ignorance, greed, is everybody wants more. They're never sated. It's never enough. And so, for example, I'll give you one more. So I remember as a kid, on Sundays, one of the merchants that we all shop at was closed on Sundays to better serve us during the week. Who wants to answer that merchant? Go on, Joel, unmute and pop it in.
Publix.
Exactly. Publix was the last major merchant to fold in South Florida when everybody else was open on Sundays. And they used to have a picture of seagulls in their parking lot. We're closed on Sunday to better serve you. And probably after 2 or 3 years of watching their profit margins get slashed, they says, forget about it. We're in. But I will say my hat's off, or my keepers off, to another merchant, and I'll be quiet. You'll tell me.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
That's right, Chick-fil-A. Now,
That's the
I'm not
religious.
crazy about Chick-fil-A's politics, but I do respect them for staying closed on Sunday. They're putting their money where their mouth is. I, once in a while, frequent there, not as a regular go-to, maybe once a month, twice a month tops. But people, they're lines like crazy. I don't think their product is that exceptional, but for whatever reason, they have a niche and people are chasing it, but they are closed on Sunday. Having said that, we need to lower the temperature. We have to be less consumption oriented. Maybe we should go back to a 2-day weekend. And the earth, one of the blessings, and I say this loosely because we all lost friends and family to COVID, the initial 3 or 4 or 5 months of COVID, things were calming down. The environment was healing. And now we're back to business as usual, unfortunately.
Stan.
Well, I was going to say Chick-fil-A is the Sunday issue, but Costco probably is a great example. They are closed on all holidays, American holidays, not Jewish holidays.
Okay, well, that's cool.
And so, Costco's considered a fantastic company.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Cool. Anybody else want to share?
Well, I thought you were fabulous tonight.
Well,
and
thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for bringing all those versions of V'Ahavtah. When we were reading the English, I was saying to myself, we should do the Debbie Friedman version. And boy, you nailed it right after. So you already had the plan in place. So thank you everybody for being part of this tonight. And I enjoy this a lot. So thank you very much, Andy, on your birthday for doing this.
Thank you. What an honor to study Torah on my birthday. Thank you. Well, listen, you all have a beautiful evening. And listen, I know some of you are from other shuls, but those that have yet to join for high holidays, please sign up and tell friends. And remember, this particular shul focuses on honoring tradition, embracing science, and celebrating spirituality. If that's of interest, keep coming and tell your friends.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it.